So in the biblical language, if you want to understand what shalom is, we can start by saying what shalom isn't. So if I threw 1,000 threads here and I just unrolled all this wool into a nice pile on the stage, we would rightly understand that it's not fabric, right? It's just a pile of wool. It's not related to, one piece is not related to another piece. There's no good that it does. It's just a mess that I guess I'm going to have to clean up at some point when I'm done this talk, right? But that's all it is. It's nothing significant. It's actually just a pile of wool. But if we contrast that to what happens when we actually begin to weave the wool together, we wind up with something quite different, right? We wind up with a blanket that actually is quite strong. It's warm. It actually represents not just wool that's piled up, but wool that's actually been woven together in and around and through every other piece. And the more interdependent the wool becomes with the other pieces of wool, the more beautiful they are. The more interwoven they are, the stronger and warmer they are. And what he's saying is that God has made the world with billions of entities, but he didn't intend them to be just an aggregation of things, a pile of loosely related things. But actually, God created a world, and God created relationships that are actually meant to be deeply woven together in interdependence. And that in that interdependence, there's a beauty and a strength and a warmth and a transformation that actually takes place. We can think about it even just in terms of our community, right? Maybe one of the things that we experienced during COVID was the sense that we had ceased in some ways to be a community. We ceased to be able to relate to each other in a way that was positive or helpful. And perhaps we began to feel a little bit like this. We were a community in many ways in name only, right? It was hard to figure out how do we actually relate to one another. And when we look at communities, we recognize that a community isn't simply the people who live in a geographic area. That's not a community. Or the people that share a building together, that's not a community. But it's actually the network, the woven together network of relationships that actually begins to form a community. And that was the beauty that we also saw during COVID, right? Was that despite the challenges that it made for us to actually come together, to be woven together, that we actually saw community prevail, that we actually saw the connections between one another prevail in ways that allowed us to actually meet the needs of one another in significant ways. So what is shalom? Cornelius Plantinga, an American theologian, puts it this way. He says, they dreamed of a new age in which human crookedness would straighten out. The foolish would be made wise, and the wise would be made humble. They dreamed of a time when deserts would bloom, the mountains would run with wine, and people would stop weeping and be able to sleep without a weapon under their pillow. People would work in peace and work to fruitful effect. A lamb could lie down with a wolf because the wolf had lost its appetite. All nature would be fruitful, benign, and filled with wonder upon wonder. All humans would be knit together in brotherhood and sisterhood, and all nature and all humans would look to God, lean toward God, and delight in God. Shouts of joy and recognition would well up from women in the streets and men at sea. So when we talk about shalom, we're talking about more than just peace. We're talking about a rightly ordered world where the relationships between each other, the relationships between us and our work, us and creation, and us and God ultimately work together to form a beautiful tapestry, something profound and beautiful.